Hello everyone, and welcome to a new video. Today I'm going to be logging the process of making this McCall's pattern, 8064. I'm going to be creating view E, which is the one right in the front here, and has short sleeves, a scoop neckline, and falls to the knee length. For my fabric, I'm going to be using this black cotton jersey knit, which is from the Pop collection at Joann's. It's a black fabric printed with little ghosts on it. I have worked with this fabric before, and admittedly, I'm not the biggest fan of it. It wasn't hard to work with. It is technically a four-way stretch knit, but there is not a whole lot of stretch in either direction, so that made it a little bit easier to work with. It wasn't really shifting out of place or stretching as I was sewing with it, nor did any of the seams ripple whenever I was sewing with it. However, the surface of the fabric I find is a little sticky, not in the tactile sense of putting my hand on here and feeling it be sticky, but rather in the sense that the surface doesn't really slide against itself too well. So as a result of that, trying to fold this fabric and have it be even and smooth was very difficult. And on the previous project I made this out of, I actually had to retrace all of my pattern pieces that were supposed to be cut on the fold onto a single piece so that I could lay them down on top of the flat, unfolded piece of fabric to avoid the frustration of trying to fold it neatly, because it just was not happening. This fabric also cannot be washed in hot water or dried on a hot temperature, which I learned the hard way because the previous project that I made with this ended up fading and looks really dingy now, and it was very upsetting. But I know better this time, so this time will be better. This is not going to be a tutorial, by the way. This pattern's actually very simple, so even if you're a complete beginner, you should be able to figure it out relatively easily. More so, this is just an exercise as a means of getting myself more comfortable with talking on camera and kind of explaining my process. So consider it more of like a progress log slash sewing log situation type deal. That being said, in advance I have already prepared all of my pattern pieces by tracing them out onto new paper, and I have also made a couple of alterations to the pattern which I am going to show you now. So these are all of the little pieces. I had to move them onto the floor because it's very difficult to see clear tracing paper on this marbled countertop, and the bigger pieces are currently draped over top of my chair. But whenever I trace off pieces from an existing pattern, what I like to do is make sure that I transfer all of the information, not just all of the notches and the dots and marks and all of that, but also the actual pattern information. So this is the sleeve, which is piece number 5, McCall's 8064, sleeve for view E, cut 2, 5/8 inch seam allowance, and I also have the size that it's in. I did make a couple of alterations to this pattern. First of all, I added pockets because this pattern did not include them. I just kind of freehanded the shape and made sure that the opening was wide enough that you could fit your hand through, as well as deep enough that you can comfortably fit a phone in here. I would put my phone down to show the scale, but I'm using it to record, as you can probably see from the shadow, so that won't really do us any good. In addition to that, I also drafted a front and back facing to finish off the neckline. The neckline is supposed to be finished off with a neck band, the same way that you would see on like a t-shirt, but historically I don't sew those very well. They always tend to look really janky and uneven and dumb, so I decided to go with a facing instead, because for me at least it is a much cleaner and nicer looking finish. And to draft these, all I did was just lay tracing paper on top of the front and back pattern pieces at the neckline, and that'll just get tacked down at like the shoulder seams and the centers whenever it's done. So all of that being said, I've already washed my fabric, so now we can get into the cutting. And hopefully it'll be a much less frustrating process than the last time that I worked with this fabric, but we shall see. So as I am laying out my pattern pieces on my very clearly, obviously spotless, clean, no dirt at all, no thread scraps at all floor, I wanted to draw attention to the fact that this fabric is a directional print, which means that there is a right side up and an upside down to the print. As I'm orienting the camera right now, all of the ghosts are glowing. That's kind of cool. That's a neat little effect of the lighting. The heads and faces are facing upward. If I was to flip it around, however, they're upside down. Being that that is the case, I have to make sure that I'm paying proper attention to the orientation of my pattern pieces as I am cutting them out, lest I end up with prints that don't match. So like, for example, I have the back piece laid out right here, and it's going in the proper direction. The ghost heads are facing upward. On the other hand, I just laid the sleeve down to illustrate this. The sleeve I have oriented upside down, which means that whenever I cut the sleeve out, the ghosts are going to be upside down. Having to pay attention to the orientation of your fabric pattern means that you do have a lot more limitations on the way that you are able to orient your pieces and cut them out, which means that you may have to purchase more fabric in order to compensate for the design. I just felt like that was worth pointing out because I have definitely made the mistake in the past of not paying attention to my print and having pieces end up with the complete wrong orientation for the sake of saving fabric. But now I will get off of my soapbox and get back to the cutting, or rather get to the cutting, as I have not made a single cut or even pinned the pieces on because I was giving my little lesson. Alright, so I have cut and marked all of my pattern pieces, and I have also applied some fusible interfacing on the back of the front and back neck facing pieces. I don't remember the exact number, but this is a lightweight knit interfacing by Pellon. And while all the pieces are out like this, I want to point out one more thing that makes this material somewhat less than ideal, and that is the fact that even though the front is black, and it's actually a pretty saturated black, the back is gray. So this design is actually printed onto gray fabric, which means that if you stretch the fabric too far, the gray starts to become visible underneath. So this material is not super well suited for designs that are really super form-fitting or meant to be really stretchy. But luckily this dress pattern it's not a super loose fit, but it's loose enough that that stretch won't be an issue. And I'm also making this a size larger than it's supposed to be for the person I'm making this for. I'm making this for my mom, by the way. I don't think I mentioned that, but she saw me working with this fabric for a different project and was like, I want something made out of that fabric. And so I looked through my pattern stash and found this dress pattern, and she liked it. So just to make sure that there's no gray fabric showing underneath and that things aren't going to stretch super weird, I decided to make it a size up from what her measurements are supposed to be. So now that all of the prep work is done, I can finally start sewing. Alright, it's been about an hour and I have a status update. I've been skipping around a lot with the pattern steps, which I typically do whenever I'm sewing from a pattern, because I find that it's a lot easier for me to batch my steps based on the type of work that I'm doing, rather than following the exact order that's outlined in the pattern. So like, I'll sew a bunch of seams together, and then I'll finish a bunch of the seams, and then I'll iron a bunch of the seams, and I'll do all the hems at once, etc., etc. I just find that that's a lot easier for me to do and makes me work more efficiently. I have sewn the facings together at the shoulder seams and also finished the outer edge with a serger. This is my serger. This is the Brother 1034D, which, based on what I've observed on the internet, is one of the more popular home serger machines. I've had this since 2017. My parents got it for me for Christmas, and it has served me very well. I did not finish these edges, the shoulders, because whenever I attach the facing to the neckline, these are going to be hidden, so they don't need to be finished. But this outer edge will remain visible, so that does need to be finished. I also went ahead and stitched the underarm seams on the sleeves and serged the bottom edge. I'm going to hem this as well before I attach them to the bodice, because it'll be a lot easier to do that. Coming back onto my lovely super clean floor, I have the dress laid out here. I've sewn it together at the shoulder seams and serged the individual edges and applied the individual pocket pieces, and now it is time to actually put the side seams together. So what I've done here is sewn at a 3/8 inch allowance to attach the pockets as they're marked, and now what I'm going to do is put the edges together and sew at a 5/8 from the very top here down to the first dot, which is somewhere in there. It's easier to see on the other side, but I'm going to sew to the first dot, pivot, go around the outside edge of the pocket, go back to the second dot, pivot, and finish the seam. So I will report back in once I have done that. Alright, the side seams have been sewn, the pockets are fully stitched together. It's kind of difficult because of the nature of the curves and the sharp corners to get the serger threads fully bound around these edges. This side actually looks pretty okay on the whole, but if I go over here, you can see this is kind of a little loose on top of each other, and then down here where I've split the seam, it's raw at the top and a little raw on the inside edge. But this is knit fabric, and knit fabric doesn't fray, so that's not really a huge deal. And as a note, I also disengaged my serger blade so that I don't accidentally mangle the edges, especially when going into those sharper corners, because I've done that before and it's not fun. I also went ahead and serged the bottom edge of the dress to prepare it for the hem. You're supposed to do an 1.25 inch folded hem, so like fold this up and then this edge under and finish it like that. But I'm actually just going to do a 5/8 inch folded hem because this edge is curved, and the outer edge of a convex curve like this, a curve that goes outward, is actually larger, it's longer than the edge that you're moving it into. So that can cause the fabric to bunch, and there can be excess that makes it a little difficult to do. So doing a smaller 5/8 of an inch hem should prevent some of that bubbling from happening. I think that's the next step that I'm going to tackle, and then from there I will need to put on the facing into the neckline, and then the sleeves, and then it'll be done. Alright, I lied. I actually did not do the hem next. I instead decided to attach the facing. So I sewed it around the neckline, clipped my curves, turned it to the inside, and then top stitched it about 1/8 of an inch away from the edge. I'm going to tack by hand the facing to, at the very least, to the shoulder seams to prevent it from like flopping around while it's worn. But before I do that, I think I'm actually going to trim the facing down because it is very wide right now. Originally, I was going to hem this by 5/8 of an inch, so it would fit more like that and be a lot narrower, but I just am lazy and don't really feel like hemming that. So instead, I think I'm just going to trim it down so that it's about 5/8 of an inch long, or maybe, 3/4 of an inch long or so, and just serge the end and then tack it to finish it off, just because I'm lazy. A couple of hours have passed, and now I am pretty much done. I got the sleeves sewn on and serged, so they're all nice and finished, and I also trimmed down the neck facing, so now it's not nearly as large, and it's a lot more manageable. It still needs to be tacked at the bare minimum at the shoulder seams as well as the centers. I might also throw a couple of tacks here and here just to make sure it doesn't flip up like that, but that won't take very long. It'll take maybe 15 minutes to do. So the last machine sewing step, the last major step that I have to do, is to finish off the hem. And as I said earlier, there is 1.25 inch hem allowed for the bottom, but I'm actually only going to hem this 5/8 of an inch. So I have run a row of chalk 1.25 inch up from the edge, so that way whenever I fold this edge up, I have a 5/8 inch line, and then I'll just top stitch around it. And because this is a stretch fabric, if I do encounter any kind of weird resistance or excess from the fold, I should just be able to stretch it and make everything fit. So that's what I'm about to do now. Alright, the facing has been tacked, the hem has been sewn, and the dress is done. My dress form is technically a little too small for the size that I made, and while it can expand to the proper measurements, I find that these Dritz expandable forms are a little finicky and temperamental, so I try not to expand them too often. Still, I am very happy with how this dress turned out, and even happier with the fact that it only took me about, I want to say, 6 hours from cutting the fabric to finishing it. Although I guess if you add in the pattern alterations and tracing from the beginning that I did off camera, it's more like 8 hours, but still. It was a nice little day project, very straightforward, not a whole lot of difficulty or a lot of hiccups along the way, and definitely acted as a nice little detox from some of the more complex projects that I've been working on recently. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time. Bye!